Okay, so this is going to be a training on how Google Ads work and how that interacts with SEO and search engines in general. Okay, so to explain Google Ads, I first have to explain how a search engine works. Okay, so a search engine, I don't know if you guys know the history, but Sergey Brin and Larry Page actually were two students at Stanford. They're the people who invented Google. And at that point, there were a bunch of search tools on the internet like Ask Jeeves. There was something called Mosaic Search Engine. So there were a bunch of existing search engines, but they worked in a different way to how Google works. So what these two guys, Larry Page and Sergey Brin, did is they actually went to the computer labs at Stanford and they wrote a little algorithm. An algorithm is just a program that can repeat itself over and over and over to spit out different kinds of results. And they wrote a program, an algorithmic program, that would go to every single website on the internet and index it. So what do we mean by indexing? Who's old enough that you actually went to a library and used index cards?
Well, do I have to say, but yeah.
I did. Yes. Okay. So I don't know if you guys remember this, but when I was a kid, you would go to the library and let's say you wanted to get a book on paper plane folding, for example, you would go to what was called the index card section. And it was a massive wooden cupboard with drawers. And you went to the drawer and every drawer had like an alphabetical, it was an alphabet. It was split up in A, B, C, D, E, F, G. So let's say you got to the P, you opened up the cards and you went through the cards and you got to the point where it said paper and you opened that card, it would give you a list of every single book that contained the word paper. And yes, that was done manually by hand. I'm not joking. It was literally done by hand. So the librarians, that was actually their main job, was to index the books and figure out what the book was about. So if the book related to paper planes or to paper in any way, they would go and write it on the card reserved for the word paper. Then if I wanted to find the book, I would go and find the card that referred to paper. I would read the card and I'd go through the list and I'll say, what is this book about? This book's about paper types. This one's about paper folding. Okay, that's pretty close. What kind of paper folding? And so I'd go through the list of all the books that contain the word paper and I would find the books. I would usually write them down on a little card. The library even gave you cards and a pencil. I don't know if you guys remember this, but you got your little card and then you'd write your references on the card. It was called a reference card. You take your reference card and then you go and it would contain shelf number, as in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it'll say where on the shelf it was kept. So block A, B, C, D. And so that would help you to walk through the library, go and find the book, whether it was fiction or non-fiction or biographies or whatever the case may be. You would go and find that book by going through the shelves and saying this shelf, this block on the shelf. And then you would just have a small amount of books to search and say, oh, here's the one on paper. I take it out and I start reading and start looking at it. So I would then go and collect 5 or 6 different books and I'd go put them on a table in the library and I'd reference those books to figure out what it was. Yes, that's how we did school projects back in the day. I don't know if you guys remember this, but that's how we did school projects. So why is that relevant here? Well, Google works in the same way. It's based on the system for indexing books in a library. It works the exact same way. So what this algorithm or the algorithmic program does is it goes and visits every single website on the internet. And it goes and looks to see, what is this website about? What keywords does the website contain? And based on that, it will build an index of what the website is about. And then it builds a table to say, like an indexing system, to say, if I search the word paper, these are the 5 million websites that contain the word paper. Which of them contain the word more often? Okay, so that's the one half, is relevance, right? Which website is relevant to the term that you're searching? The next part of how Google works has to do with academia. So who's ever written a paper or something in varsity? Anyone? You guys wrote a paper, some sort of project that you did. If you write a paper or a dissertation or a thesis, as they're called, what you would do is you would write everything, but every time you referred to someone else's thesis or someone else's dissertation, you would go and cite them. They're called citations, right? And with a citation, you're saying, I looked at that person's research, and based on what they said, I'm drawing these conclusions. And the authority of a specific paper is measured by how many times it is cited. Does that make any sense to you guys?
Yes.
Right? So if a lot of people are citing someone's paper, it means that paper's had a really big effect on academia. So all of human knowledge is based on this idea, all of academia. I'll give you an example. Sandra had to write a paper for her master's, and the question that she was trying to answer was, do computers really help children read and learn to read faster? That was the question she set out to answer. And she didn't want to go and do her own research. In other words, she didn't want to create a survey, set up a questionnaire, get the permission from the Department of Education to go and work with kids and get their information. So what she did was she went to the academic library, which is actually a digital system, and she looked for everyone else who had done studies where she could piggyback on the research that they already did. And she just pulled the information and said, this person did research on computers in education. This person did research. And she read all of that, and she wrote her own paper by citing the research that they did. And the system keeps book. So after her dissertation is finished, she would go and give that to the university. It belongs to the university. Yes, she is the person who wrote the paper, but the research always belongs to the university that gives you the degree or whatever. Now, that paper gets read into the system, and every citation that she made is then referenced, and every paper gets more authoritative as more people cite it. So if you wanted to ask an academic, or if you wanted to corner an academic that thinks they're really, really clever, you say to them, oh, what was your dissertation about? Or what was your thesis about? So the difference is a dissertation is for master's level or below. A thesis is for doctor's level and above. Okay. A dissertation, you're allowed to make conjectures. You're not really saying this is definitely the truth. You're making an assumption. Where a thesis becomes part of the knowledge of the world, and it's got a lot more scrutiny that goes into it. So if you want to corner someone who's got a doctorate, you ask them, yes, what was your thesis about? And if they tell you, then you say, and how many times has it been cited? And if they say 0, it means their doctorate has not had any effect on the academic or on academia. And that's usually a way to sort of put them down a notch, if you understand what I'm saying. Okay, so why is this relevant? That number of citations gives the academic or the paper that they wrote a certain amount of authority. So if I'm saying I'm referring to a paper that has 100 citations, and that's a lot of citations, 100 other papers cited this, I know that the information's been scrutinized by 100 other people and that they found the information to be accurate and usable. So it improves the authority of that paper. Now, okay, you see there's 2 library systems here. There's the indexing system that allows you to find books that are relevant to the thing that you're searching for. And then there's something that basically explains to you how solid is this information? How reputable is this information? How certain am I that the information is accurate? The internet works in the exact same way, or Google search or search algorithms work in the exact same way. They make an index of everything, and then based on how many other websites refer to that website in hyperlinks and those sorts of things, it will give it a score. It also measures how much traffic is that backlink generating. So for example, Xponent is building a website for a client. Why do we make social media posts even if we don't get a lot of links and stuff to it, or if we don't get a lot of traffic from it? Well, the social media post refers back to the website with a call to action. But why do I tell you guys to put a link to the website into the Facebook post? This is the reason why. Because anyone that clicks on that link and ends up on the website increases our authority, because Google's saying, hey, this website's got a backlink from Facebook. Facebook's linking back to this. And people are clicking on that link to get to this website, meaning more and more people are finding this information to be credible, relevant, or authoritative. Is this making any sense, right? This makes sense, right? Okay. And based on that, you get a ranking. The websites that list first on Google are the ones that have their relevance sorted out properly. That's why we put the URL into the correct URL. So we put the keyword in the URL. But then I've got to put those very same keywords into the headings. So remember when you're typing a document, you create headings, heading 1, heading 2, heading 3. Websites work the same way. You get a heading 1, heading 2, heading 3. And if the keywords are contained in the headings and they also match what's in the URL, that helps the indexing bot to figure out what that page is about. Now, the copy on the website should be at least 600 words of content on the website. Without at least 600 words, Google goes, I don't know what this website's about. There's just not enough content for me to understand what it's about. Ideally, it would have around 1,100 words. Then it's really easy for the crawl bot to understand what that web page is about. Because remember, it doesn't only index the website, it indexes it by the page. So it says it's this website with this page and this page and this page and this page and this page. And it builds that structure based on the sitemap that we provide. Now, that gives you the relevance, but who does it show first? How does it rank them? Well, it ranks them based on that authority score I was talking about. If that website's being visited and it doesn't have a lot of bounces, then Google says, okay, that's a lot of successful website visitors. When I showed this website to someone searching, they clicked on the link, they went to the website and they interacted. They clicked through to go and read a second page, or they went to the contact us page. And Google's very clever. That's how it knows. It'll say, oh, first people looked at this page, and then they navigated to the About Us page, and then they went to the Contact Us page. Okay, every time someone asks for this, I'm going to keep showing them this because they found the information that they wanted. And that's why ranking on Google is so important. Is this making any sense to you guys? This is making sense, right? In terms of writing articles, in terms of how Google ranks stuff. And I mean, who installs our site kits? The Google Search Console. Who does that? Harak, Ruan, who else?
Yeah.
The two of you, right?
Yes.
How do you do that?
You have the plugin sitekit. Install the plugin, log into your account, select the account that you want to use, so the property, and then it links it. Yes, we use the plugin because it's easier. That just keeps track of your analytics and your data. So actually how you index it is every website has got what you call a Robots.txt file. So when Google sees if it can find your website, then it goes into this file. It's called the Robots.txt file. That's where you actually do your SEO and things like that. So there you can say if it's indexed, no index. So there it can see, oh, I should scrape the site. They're fine with it. Well, they want me to scrape it.
So for example, if we build an e-learning platform and we don't want people to be able to find it on the internet, Harak will go and tell Google, don't index this website. It's standard practice for us to not index staging environments, because imagine we put staging environments onto Google, people will find that and they'll go to it. And remember, there are other bots that also crawl for other reasons. Okay, so now that you guys have a basic understanding of how search engines choose which websites to show you and how it chooses which ones are first, second, third, fourth, and what's on the second page of Google, which is basically the dark web to most people. Let's bring that back to Google Ads. So what Google does with Google Ads is it says, hey, you haven't done the work to actually rank organically in first, second, third, fourth, or fifth place. So we're going to charge you money to skip the queue. So you're going to tell us which words do you want to rank for. That's how we choose the keywords for Google Ads. And we can get into keywords, but that's a whole different thing because you get broad match keywords, you get exact keywords. There are lots of different keywords. But for now, let's just think about a keyword as being a word that's being referenced. Right? Remember that reference system, the indexing system I was talking about? Those keywords are the words that Google references or associates with your website. Then you say, what is the search term? Okay, how is a keyword different from a search term? A keyword could be 2 words next to each other or even 3 words. The moment you add an intent or some other words to the keyword, it becomes a search term. Based on that, Google then runs an auction. So Google says, how many people are trying to buy this space? Who wants to buy this keyword? Who wants to rank for this? And if there's only one company doing it, it's going to make the price really, really cheap, because it's like, okay, there's not a lot of demand for this keyword. These guys can have it for 50 cents. Every time someone types the word, I'm going to display their website first. And that's where the sponsored post comes in, right? That's where you see the sponsored post at the top, where it has a little AD in a block in the top corner. It has the word sponsored written above it. It used to say ad, now it says sponsored. So Google's basically allowing you to cheat or to manipulate the search results by giving you 3 spaces. So remember, they only used to have 1 spot at the top. Then they were like, oh, but now we can have 2 people so we can make more money. And then they were like, oh, wait, let's just have 3 people. And now you're seeing 3 results first. Then you see Google My Business. And then under that, you see the AI results or above, depending on what you're searching. And only then will it show you the organic rankings. So do you see what Google's doing? Is they're selling you the ability to cheat their own system. That's how Google Ads works. And the thing about Google Ads, why I think that Google Ads should never be sold without an SEO package. You guys know that we've now bundled our SEO and our Google Ads together in a product called Search Engine Marketing. Why did I do that? Well, because if you're not fixing the search engine optimization, then your ads become really expensive. Now, let me explain that. Why does it become very expensive? The thing is, Google can allow you, I'm not saying they do this, I'm saying they could say, anyone on the internet can put money in and they can rank for the search term. And if they put more money in, then they're going to win the search, or they're going to win the bid every time. So they're going to buy a bunch of traffic. But the reality is, Google is still a product. It's still a service. If they allow people to just manipulate their service with no consequences, then people are going to spend money to get traffic. The people that are going to the website don't actually want to see that site. So people are going to lose faith in Google. They're going to say, Google's not really that accurate. Let me try something else. Let me try Bing. Let me try Safari. Let me try DuckDuckGo. And let me try Brave, whatever all of those other platforms are. Okay. So what Google does is it doesn't only say, okay, you've paid money, therefore you go first. What it says is, how much money do you want to pay? And I'm going to multiply that with a factor. That factor is dependent on your relevance and your authority. So for example, and let's just use a scale of 100, even though I think domain scores work on a different scale. I think they go up to 1,000 or something like that. But let's just use percentages. Let's just say 100%. So let's say domain score of 10. Competitor has a domain score of 1, for example. Now, both of them bid. I'm going to put 5 Rand per bid until my budget runs out. The competitor says, I'm also going to put in 5 Rand per bid. So Google says 5 Rand multiplied by that domain score, which is a combination of authority and relevance. And it says, you've got a score of 10. You put in 5 Rand multiplied by 10 equals to a score of 50. Competitor, you've only got a score of 1 and you've put in 5 Rand. 5 Rand multiplied by 1 equals a score of 5. And then it says, who's got the highest score? The person with 50 has the highest score. You're going to rank first. Competitor, you're going to rank second. And both of you are going to pay 5 Rand. Is this making sense? Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is search ads. But this is how search ads work. But now, how do display ads work? With a display ad, I'm showing people a picture. You know when you open an app and they've got that little strip at the bottom where they're showing you ads? You guys know what I'm talking about, right? That's called Google AdSense. That's an app developer saying, hey, I want to make money out of my app, but I don't want to charge people to download it. So Google, please put an ad on my app. I don't really care what, because I don't have control over that. And then what Google's going to do is it's going to give you affinity categories. They used to be called affinity categories. I don't know what they're called. But affinity categories basically try and determine what is the app about. And by the way, it's not only apps, it's also for your news feed. So Google uses your browser, your Chrome browser, or whatever the case may be, to determine or to create a profile of you as a person. It asks questions like, what sort of news articles do you read? What kind of websites do you visit? Do you often visit engineering websites? Do you often visit fashion websites? Are you on Takealot? Do you click on buttons or on links that contain the word sale? Do you click on links that contain the word promotion? And so it's building a profile of who you are. Are you male? Are you female? How old are you? Do you have children? And it actually has a fairly accurate idea of who you are. And Duane, this is where I need you to step in because I don't know display ads that well. But basically, when you set up a display campaign, I don't think you choose keywords, right? You choose affinity categories. And based on that, it'll display. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, you choose affinity categories, but Google has a new feature. You can add keywords to display ads now. So, yeah.
So that's probably, they're probably going to start allowing you to put display ads on Google search.
Yes, I think so, yeah.
I think that's what's going to happen next.
Yeah.
So they're basically figuring out a way to index apps and websites to figure out what the website is about without referencing keywords. And then based on that, you can put in affinity categories. So affinity categories could include things like car enthusiasts, fashionistas. They've got a massive list of different categories. And so the person running Google Ads, Duane in this case, has to think about, what kind of person do I want to target with this? How many of them are there? So it becomes a sort of a game of association. You ask the question, if I'm trying to sell windows, glass and aluminium windows and doors, for example, there's not going to be an affinity category that says glass and aluminium windows and doors. It's too specific. There'd be millions upon millions of categories, and it'd be too difficult for Google to actually allow you to choose stuff. Although Duane is now saying that you can add keywords, which is awesome. It's going to give you a category like DIY people, homeowners, renovation people, people that want to renovate. Those would then be the affinity categories, because someone who's a homeowner would typically be someone who's in the market for glass and aluminium. And so you have to make a logical leap or an assumption to say, I assume that these kinds of people will be interested in this kind of product. Carries on. Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes a lot more sense now. Thank you.
So generally, we'll start off with a search campaign. And if it doesn't work, we'll shift over to a display campaign. And if I can tell you like what goes into that decision for me, I usually ask the question, do I want to show the ad to someone without them having specifically asked for it? So they didn't search glass and aluminium windows and doors near me, but rather that they're part of a category and they might just be browsing. And so they might just see a display ad and they'll get an impression and an impression and an impression on something. So that's when I'm prioritizing impression type campaigns. I want to get the brand out there. I want to get the word out there. I want to show people the logo. I want to get them comfortable with the brand. That's when a display campaign works really well, at least in my opinion. Versus a search campaign, I can be very specific on what kind of searches I want to target. So I can tell Google, I want to prioritize people with purchase intent. So if they're using the word near me, price, in that search term, I know that they're looking to buy something. And so it sounds like, oh, but why don't we just optimize everything for those types of search terms? Well, the thing is, those bids become more expensive because everyone wants those search terms. So the auction becomes more expensive to buy those search terms. And so when the account executives write reports, they're often looking at that and saying, did I get more traffic? Oh, the traffic might be down. Did I get the same amount of leads? Yes, I did. It doesn't really matter. My traffic might have gone down, but the quality of my traffic was better. And so less traffic is not always a bad thing. And a lot of people say, oh, but look at my traffic, it's going down. Well, I don't really think it matters as long as you're generating leads, because at the end of the day, the quality of the traffic matters a lot as well. And that's where digital marketing has a massive, massive advantage above traditional marketing, because traditional marketing can tell you, oh, we distribute this website or this magazine to 50,000 readers and we know that they read the magazine or whatever. But they don't really know. People could buy the magazine, put it in their toilet and never read it. The other thing they can't tell you is who's reading the magazine. So yes, that person bought the magazine, but their son might be reading it, or someone in the lobby might be reading it, or someone who just wanted to use the commode temporarily picks up a magazine while they're doing their business. So they don't really know who's doing what. Where Google can tell you with pinpoint accuracy who's searching, all of those sorts of information. And they've got profiles on pretty much everyone on the planet that uses their service, which is a lot. There's like 4 or 5 billion profiles the last time I checked, and they've got that stuff down. They say that it's aggregated data, but I promise you, in the back end, they're probably doing a lot more with that information than we even know about. Which, if you take Facebook, for example, I don't know if you guys remember this, but the Cambridge Analytica scandal came out. And that's when Facebook took user profile data and sold it to Cambridge's research company called Analytica. They sold that information for people to do academic research with, by the way. Interesting, right? Full circle back to academia. There are tools that you can use. And at this point, I'm going to actually hand over to Gerard and to Ruan, because they actually know this stuff a lot better than I do. So maybe Ruan can go first. Gerard, you go second. Ruan, what tools can Sasha use to do research on a client, and which keywords will be relevant for them?
Right. The only platforms that I can think of now, it's a plugin that you add to your browser. I can maybe share the plugin here or the link. And then a paid version is SEMrush. I do know we have used SEMrush in the past, but that gives you a very detailed keyword list that might be something to look into the future for to use. But yeah, like I said, Keyword Surfer is the one we use, and then another one is also the Keyword Planner in Google Ads. So those are the two free ones, and then also there is another one that you can access through a client's Google Search Console. So yeah, that's the tool I would suggest.
Can you show us how you pull a list of keywords?
I just want to interject here. Keywords, do you do it initially based on the content and you change it accordingly over time? Or do you do it from the beginning? Because, I mean, how can Google know based on new content what keywords I'm going to use?
I'll take this one. So Sasha, we obviously do research and then we make some assumptions. So something that's always going to be included is the company's brand name. That's the name that people are familiar with on the internet, and not on the internet, but in the world. And then we would go and look at products specifically. So all of their product names or keywords will then become keywords that we list. And then there are other keywords that you can add based on research. So the answer is yes, we do both. We actually do an initial research when we're writing the copy, and we'll add some keywords based on that. And then afterwards, so in other words, that's our guessing, informed guessing. And then based on that, we'll actually look at the performance and we'll slowly but surely edit the website over time. Ruan does get a score on the website. Log into the website itself and you look at the score from the website's point of view. Google will actually give you a score to tell you how well is your website optimized.
But yeah, because here is the search results. So here you can literally drag how people are interacting with your site. So you can check like what search terms bring them. So this is also a very useful tool to use, is your Google Search Console. Yeah, that's...
So Sasha, something that I'll add here, and this is for everyone's benefit, is search engine optimization, Google search, Google ads. It's not an exact science. It's not something where you can say, this is the right way, this is not the right way. And there's generally a mix of things that you would use. So you would use your own assumptions, and like, I think this is a good idea. But then you need to choose a strategy. Like, are you going to try and rank for things that a lot of other people are ranking for? And that's usually really difficult, right? Because they've already built up the authority. And so you're trying to catch up in a race where they've got a huge lead ahead of you. Now, the other option is to go look at new terminology that not a lot of people are ranking for, but that can still generate some traffic for you. And then what you would do is you would write articles and create content that actually targets those new niche topics that would then generate some traffic and give you a leg up to attract a certain kind of clientele. And based on that, you're increasing your authority, and then you can go and launch stuff that could, or launch articles and content that would then go and compete with some of those existing search terms. In closing, I'll explain one thing. I've explained this 100 times, but let me do it again. Do you understand what network effects are? Network effects. Who's heard of this? I've explained this many, many times, but I'll explain it again. Okay, imagine there's 10 people in a room. This is the Tower of Babel thought experiment. This is the thought experiment that the research is based on. So imagine there's 10 people in a room, and all 10 of those people speak different languages. But there's one that speaks English, and one that speaks French, and one that speaks German, and etc. Chinese, and so on. Everyone speaks a different language. No one can communicate with each other. But then one person decides, I'm going to figure out how to speak another language. So let's say it's the French person, and they go to the English person and they start figuring out how to talk to each other. And eventually the French person learns English. Now there's 2 people in this pool of 10 people that can speak English. So the usefulness of learning English, it's got double the utility, because instead of being able to, like if I decide I'm going to learn French, I can only speak to the one person that speaks French. But if I learn English, I can speak to 2 people because there are 2 people that speak English. So it's more valuable for me to learn English than French, because if I learn English, I can speak to the English speaker, but I can also speak to the French speaker, and I can learn how to speak French, because now the French person can teach me English, or can teach me French because I know English. And now 3 people know it. And it actually works exponentially. So the next person says, which language do I want to learn? The obvious answer is English, because I can speak to 3 people. I can learn 2 additional languages, and it just makes sense. So now I also learn English. And before you know it, everyone speaks English as a second language, right? We know this in the world because England went and just colonized most of the planet. And so English was just a really useful language to learn. And so more people learned English. And today, even though England is a really small country, more people speak English than any other language on the planet. Maybe not as a first language, but English as a second language is massive worldwide. I mean, how many people in South Africa can't speak English? Very few, right? So that's network effects. How does this make sense, or how does this relate to our search engine marketing? Well, the same thing sort of happens. If one website is ranking for a term, let's say it's night shoes for sale in South Africa, Tacky Town probably ranks the highest for that. I'm just guessing. But because it's ranking higher, more people are going to go click on it because it's already ranking first. So because more people click on it, it gains in relevance. And so more people click on it. And because more people click on it, it gains more relevance. And therefore more people click on it. And so it's a virtuous cycle that takes you all the way to the top. And once you've got that top position, it's very difficult for other people to knock you off of that position. And so that's why a perfect strategy for a client who's entering the search space is to give them organic, that would be the articles, that would be the on-page SEO that we do, and etc. And specifically trying to look for niche topics and new topics and places where you can sort of be scrappy about the traffic that you're getting. But at the same time, you just go and pay for traffic on those big terms. And that still helps, right? That still actually improves your relevance and your authority. And so it's the combination between these systems that actually make the most sense. Okay, excellent. I hope you guys learned something today. Well, I'll close off by saying a question that's on my mind at the moment is, how is Google going to use the ads ecosystem to manipulate the AI results that you get from Gemini? That's the real question that we should be asking. Sure, this is the existing search market, but that market is declining very quickly. So we need to think about the future. And the reality is, organic search is going to be more important than ever. That's my opinion. I can't tell you for sure because no one knows for sure at this point, except maybe the brains at Google. Fun little tidbit of information before I go. So there's a tool called Page Insights. Ruan, I don't know if you use it. It's like Search Console, but you can go to Page Insights, Google Page Insights. Everyone thinks it's because it works with web pages, but it's not called that because of web pages. It's called that because the inventor's name is Larry Page. So Larry Page got really upset about the way that their system worked. They had a meeting in Google and they were like, look, we need to figure out a way to give people information. And he went overnight, he sat through the night and he coded a thing called Google Page Insights, and he delivered it the next morning and he called it Larry Page's Insights, and they called the tool Page Insights. But it's not named for web pages, it's named for Larry Page. Pretty cool, right? The thing that you guys have to understand, and this is going to lead to Gerard's talk next week, is what you have to understand is computing and the internet and all of this stuff took thousands and thousands of scientists their entire life just to build small little parts of it that came together and created the internet. No one person sat there and said, I've got the plan, we're going to invent the internet. It's little things that people built separately that started talking to each other. And that's why websites break. Things need to be maintained. Systems need to be organized and updated and all that stuff, because it's a dynamic system. No one is in control of it. Everyone just does whatever they want. It's the Wild West. And so people have been trying to put oversight on the internet for years, right? The debate is called the net neutrality debate. Do we want it to be this way, or do we want people to have top-down oversight and decide how the internet is supposed to be built? If Steve was here, he would tell you net neutrality all the way. We don't want people in charge. We want it to be anarchistic. And yes, that comes at a cost of having to manage and maintain and react. But it makes the internet neutral, or more neutral than it could be. So those are the sorts of things that you need to think about and explain this IPv4. Last tidbit of information. The first email that was sent was invented because there were two campuses. I think it's Cambridge and Harvard. I can't remember exactly which two it was, but it was two campuses. I think it was MIT and Cambridge. And it was a computer scientist whose girlfriend or wife or whatever at the time was working on the other campus, and he was on the one campus. And he couldn't phone her during the day because he was obviously lecturing and he was in a building. So he wrote a protocol to send an email to her over the phone line called Send Mail Transfer Protocol, or what's known today as SMTP, right? When you set up the send protocol, he didn't code it to be a backwards and forwards thing. He only coded the send because he wanted to send her messages and he wanted her to send him messages. So he basically wrote the protocol, installed it on the phone line that connected them, and it actually used the telephone numbers to send messages. And it used her fax to actually print out the first email. But it wasn't fax, it was send mail transfer protocol. And he did it without sending faxes through the fax system, which cost money. So he actually bypassed the entire faxing system and wrote the first email. And then they displayed it on a computer screen instead, because he had a computer, but they were networked, but networks didn't have email back then. Networks were used for other stuff like sharing printers. And so he made the email pop up on her computer. And so he sent a love letter, and wanting to invent a way to send love letters to his girlfriend, he invented SMTP. Pretty cool, right?
Very.
That's interesting. It's crazy to think that all of this stuff was invented by people just solving little problems for themselves. And today it's the new system that the whole world runs on. So anyway, we'll close up on that. I hope you guys learned a lot today. I hope you guys had a fantastic morning, and good luck with the rest of the day.